Hi guys, it's me again. I decided to go ahead and post a presentation just about the theoretical framework paper for now, and I'll probably do one about the theory analysis and also one about the concept analysis, so you guys kind of feel like you've had it explained to you how to do these assignments rather than just reading it in the syllabus. I guess that's a little bit of a disadvantage of online classes is you are supposed to be so self-directed. So this is a good way to kind of get around that and let us at least explain it to you, and then you can ask questions specifically that you have. So I've got up here the assignment from the syllabus for the theoretical framework paper, and I'll just kind of go over it. This will be probably a short presentation, but just something you can refer back to. So you will each write a paper based on your research interests. Now, some of you will be doing a capstone project at the end of your program, the DNP students. But those of you who are not DNP students don't do a capstone, but I talked to Dr. Byers and she said that you do like an end project about a research interest, so this would be applicable for that. Maybe you can start thinking ahead a little bit about something that you're specifically interested in and would like to research in the future. So you're going to think about what that research interest is, and you're going to decide on a theoretical framework that would guide that project. That's why I've kind of been exploring several different frameworks in these discussion boards this first couple weeks. Last week's discussion was a lot about pick a theorist and talk about the meta-paradigm concepts that I explained to you. So that way now you've been exposed to quite a few different theories, and there may have been one that jumped out at you, the one you did or the one someone else did. And this week the question is about picking a theoretical framework that would really guide your practice. So again, you're going to be exposed to 10 or 11 or 12 different theories this week. There's also lots of different ones in your book, but I want you to pick the one that you feel like could really guide your project. So that being said, the paper is not supposed to be more than 5 pages. It's just a short paper. It does need to have an introduction, just like every paper does. It needs to have headings. Those of you who've had me before know that I really like headings and subheadings in papers. I think it really helps you to break up the paper and to be sure that you meet all the requirements for the assignment. So use those headings. It'll be to your advantage. And then also have a conclusion that kind of wraps up the entire paper like a summary. So aside from the intro, you will need to describe your project briefly. What is your research interest? What do you want to study? Those of you in anesthesia, it may be that it's something anesthesia related. Just there's tons of different things that you can look at. Do some literature reviews. Look in some journals online or hard copy. Look at some and see what are some big deals that are going on right now in your area. So describe your project. What are you interested in? What problem are you trying to solve? So if you're going to do some research about something, it should be about something that there's a problem. In other words, if you're going to research nursing education and students' ability to critically think, and that's what my example here was. If you're going to study that, then you need to have looked in the research and see that, well, there's a problem right now. Students aren't critically thinking. Nursing students get out there and they don't know how to think critically in emergency situations. So that's a problem, and I want to research it and study it and try to figure it out. So what problem are you trying to solve, and why are you trying to solve it? So in my situation, these students that can't critically think, well, nursing students, when they graduate and they become nurses, they need to be able to think critically, to be able to problem solve and to work through patient situations and produce better patient outcomes. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve, and that's why I want my patients to have better outcomes. So most of the time, the reason you're trying to solve it is for patients in nursing. So you're trying to produce better patient outcomes. But you're going to have to look in professional literature to determine that. So the significance of the problem in my example is that, well, if nursing students can't think critically, and they get out there and they're practicing nurses that can't think critically, then you're going to have patients who are going to suffer because of it. That's significant. We're going to have patients that are hospitalized longer, and we're going to have more dollars being spent on healthcare because patients are hospitalized longer and more frequently. So you see, most of these problems that nurses have are going to end up causing patient problems, and you need to look in professional nursing journals to figure out what the problem is, why it's a problem, why you want to solve it, why it's significant. So that's the beginning of your paper. Then you're going to identify a potential theoretical framework to guide your project. Anytime you do research, I don't know how many of you have done research studies before, and you may not have done them, that's okay, but anytime you do those, you need to typically guide what you're doing with a theoretical framework, with a theory, and that's what this class is all about. So you may find some of the ones you guys have mentioned, Orem and Watson. Maybe you've discovered, or you feel like after reading through literature, that there's a problem with caring. Nursing students today are not as caring as they were 10 years ago based on some studies that you saw. So you may find that you want to go out and you would like to implement some sort of program that will describe caring to students, and maybe even a questionnaire to see if students are caring or not. And all of this is going to be guided by your theory of caring that you chose, possibly Gene Watson. So you've identified a theory that really is going to direct your study. A theoretical framework guides and directs your study. So I want you to identify that theory and give a little overview of it. So if it was Gene Watson, you would talk about all those curative factors that she described. So just an overview of it. What are the major concepts? What do those mean? And I say here, provide a definition for each of those concepts. So for Gene Watson, you would define caring. Now that doesn't mean that you would define it just, oh, I think caring is this. You're going to look in literature. You may have to look up 4 or 5 articles that are about Gene Watson's theory, and you're going to use those definitions to come up with a definition for each of the concepts. Usually a theory will have several different concepts, not just one, so keep that in mind. It's very smart when doing those definitions of the concepts to look back at the theorist's actual writing. So instead of looking at articles by Smith and Jones that talk about Watson, look at some articles actually written by Watson about that theory, and you can really get to the bottom of it. And then you're going to identify the relationships among the major concepts. So you may see in a specific theory that the theorist describes these 2 or 3 concepts and says that if a person does this, then this will occur, or if a person does this and this, then this will happen. So that's what I mean by the relationships. You're going to see how the theorist said that those concepts are related. And the next step will be to describe how the concepts could be operationalized into measurement variables, and that's a mouthful, but all it means is how would you measure them. So if Gene Watson talks about caring, then how does she suggest that you measure caring? That's a hard one, because some people might think you can do it with a questionnaire, and some people might say you can only do it through observation. But look in some literature and figure out how does that person think that you could measure those concepts. So would it be a scale or a questionnaire? Would it be through interviews? So just describe how you would measure the concepts. And you also need to analyze how you can view your project's problem through the framework. So in other words, why did you pick that specific framework to guide your project? This is where we're really kind of connecting all this. So you told me about your project, you told me about the framework, now how do those go together? So I gave you an example here. This was from my dissertation. I looked at the effect of reflective writing on critical thinking skills, and I used a critical thinking theory by Richard Paul. I found that all of the concepts that he described in his theory of critical thinking were actually concepts that I wanted to see in my students. So when he talked about in his critical thinking theory that you should be able to problem solve, and you should be able to analyze, and you should be able to question, I read that and I thought, those are all things I want my students to do. So do you see the connection there? I saw the theory and I saw those concepts, and that's exactly what the outcomes I wanted to be in my students were. So when you look at the theory, be sure it's something that really resonates with you, something that you really would like to see occurring. With Jean Watson and her definitions of caring, do you see that as, yes, that's exactly what I want my nurses to do at the facility that I'm going to work at? So anyway, I found that with Richard Paul. I thought those were things that I wanted to see in my students, and based on the literature, that's what everybody, all nursing faculty, wanted to see in their students. And I also found that I looked at writing skills along with critical thinking, and I found that all of those concepts he described about putting things in order and coming up with a question, answering it, and being able to be brief but be clear, those were also things that I wanted to see in writing in my students. So I found a definite connection there that, in looking at critical thinking and writing, that his theory just worked perfectly. So I think you'll be able to find one that you really like all the concepts, you like the relationships between the concepts, and you think it will work great for your project. I actually also found a questionnaire that he had contributed to that measured critical thinking. So that's how I measured critical thinking in my group that I studied. So you'll probably find that in these theories, that a lot of the ones you guys have been mentioning are really well known, and they've been used over and over and over in lots of different studies, and you'll see how people measured those concepts. They probably developed questionnaires. The theorists themselves have developed questionnaires. So what you need to see is that there's cohesion among the framework that you choose, the theoretical definitions that you come up with, and then how you operationalize or measure them. And so in some way, that theoretical framework you choose should contribute to your project. And a lot of times people actually choose a theoretical framework before they really come up with an idea for your project, and that's really what you're supposed to do, especially in quantitative research. Your framework should guide your study. So I found Richard Paul's model that talked about critical thinking, and then I used that to decide, ooh, I think I need to look at writing in critical thinking too, because it just works so well. So you just want there to be cohesion between all the concepts and what you're studying, and you need to be able to explain why you're studying something and why you would use that particular theory. So that's the gist of it. I think that you'll enjoy doing this paper. I think that it'll help you later on too, as you start doing those final projects and capstones, that you've found a theory, you know what it's all about, you know what those concepts mean, and you know how you could measure them. If it came down to that in your study that you're going to do, if it came down to that you really want to measure caring, you would already know how to do that, and you would know why you were doing it. So I hope that helps a little bit. If you have any more questions, just feel free to email or call me. Come see me in my office if you're close by. And I will be posting another Tegrity presentation about your other assignments later too. Thanks a lot.